Chucky makes thumbnails for MrBeast. Yeah, these thumbnails. The ones that get millions and millions of clicks, hundreds of millions, titles and intros too. The whole package, focused on how to get the click, how to reward the click, how to make sure people click again and again. He thinks about all of it all the time and how to get better at it all the time. It's his literal job for the biggest creator on the platform. Todd is Senior Director of Growth and Discovery at YouTube. All of these thumbnails, yeah, his team is the one that serves them all up to us on the homepage every day, every second of every day, that tracks which ones we click on and don't, stay on and don't, which ones satisfy us the most, and a ton of other signals to determine what gets recommended to us next, all on the biggest video platform on the planet. And me? I'm Rene, longtime creator, now YouTube's official liaison, who gets to bring them both together to share all of their most candid thumbnail and video packaging secrets with you on this, our brand new podcast. So I guess the first question, and I want to open with you, Chucky, is we all know the basics of thumbnails. Like a good thumbnail should stop us from scanning around the homepage, should stop us from scrolling on our mobile device, on our phone, and just get our attention. But what else does a thumbnail need to be from your perspective?
Yeah, so I think that the thumbnail needs to have two things. You need to have interest in your thumbnail. It's like the most important factor. If people are scrolling, they need to be interested in it. And so there's three ways that we create interest in a thumbnail. And so one of them is by grabbing attention. It's like basically making something interesting. It always goes hand in hand with attention. Another way is through trust. You want people to be able to trust that what they click on is actually what's going to happen in the video. And then the third one is curiosity. Curiosity could also lead to a click. If someone's curious, they're more likely to click on a video. So that is the first part, is interest. The second part would be the packaging of it. You want to make sure that the title, the thumbnail, and the idea are just really, really strong. And that would help, make the video more interesting to click on as well.
One thing you mentioned there that I think a lot of creators don't necessarily appreciate is the trust element. And we've talked before about this idea that the click-through on a particular video can be quite influenced by how your previous video performed. And so this is something where I think it's good for creators to focus on the long-term delivery, not just with a particular video, like delivering, but building that brand up so that that can actually help your click-through rate.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Trust is what makes, people come back and click on your videos. If we had lied in any of our videos and people felt like they were misled, the audience wouldn't keep building. Eventually, we'd start to see the audience not coming back. So trust is, I agree completely. It's a very important factor.
There's two things I want to tease out there. One, Todd, we often hear creators say, if I make a dud, YouTube is not going to recommend my next video. And that's different from what you're talking about here, right? Here, it's like you gave them such a good experience that regardless of that video, they're going to be interested in your content going forward.
Yeah, we aim for the algorithm to match the audience's interests. So if the audience doesn't care that the previous video that you uploaded, didn't perform, like if there weren't that many people who watched it, yet the new video that you've delivered actually provides a ton of value, we wouldn't want the algorithm to be like, oh, well, the last video wasn't that great, so let's not even bother with this video. We want each video to reach its full potential. And so we aim not to hold back videos based on other videos' performance. But with that said, the audience does, remember what their experiences were. So if you do have a dud and it left a lasting impression on someone that your brand or channel just doesn't deliver, the audience may react and just be less likely to watch when they see that recommendation. That's not the algorithm, doing anything. It's the audience reaction, which is what we listen to.
So that brings me to this question, Chucky. How important then is consistency across your thumbnails, both the new thumbnails you have now and the thumbnails going forward?
Consistency is important. I see a lot of people that end up having great packaging through, finding whether it's like a certain format where if they're maybe doing a podcast, they have like a white background and they have some text that goes along with the person's face who they're interviewing, and they try to find a way to create that like format where it's like, oh, if I see that video, for example, Colin and Samir, I think that they have a great thumbnail format where if you see it in your recommendations or your homepage, you're more likely to click on it because you're like, oh, the last video I watched with this creator was really good, and now I see the similar format, so it stands out to me.
Even though it doesn't have Colin and Samir's face or branding on it, you know it's a Colin and Samir video.
Exactly. And I think that they do a really great job with branding. And the same thing with us is like, in 2019, we decided to start putting Jimmy's face in every thumbnail because we were branding the videos around him. If you trusted Jimmy on the last video that he uploaded and he delivered on the content, that the next video you see and you see his face, you'd be like, oh, that's the guy that delivered on the last video I enjoyed. So I'm going to click on this video as well because he most likely did it.
That brings up a question I've heard creators ask about, and sometimes I've seen some gurus out there saying, oh, well, you need to have two faces in your thumbnail, or you must have a face in your thumbnail, or, don't put your face in a thumbnail. And I think, when you hear those questions, and I'm always telling creators to like anchor the answers and their questions in what the audience reactions are and not think about the algorithm, because the algorithm, it doesn't have a like how many faces are in this thumbnail, and it doesn't care.
A minimum face count.
Yes. So, but what we do see is that people react to faces, right? And while Chucky was saying that with MrBeast, having Jimmy in the thumbnail has proven to be like a really good kind of shortcut for people to say, oh, I trust that guy, I'm going to watch this video. I've also seen cases where maybe a creator that isn't quite as established as a personality or brand as a MrBeast, they may have a different experience in putting their faces in a thumbnail. Often what having a face in a thumbnail does is help you recognize something familiar. But if you are seeing a channel for the first time, and you don't know the person behind the channel, it may not help you decide whether it's a great video to watch. And so think about different thumbnails might appeal to different audiences based on their history with your channel. And if you're in the phase of building up an audience in your channel where you haven't necessarily had millions of viewers who have watched and know your face, you might need to lean on other elements of your video to attract new audiences. And so I encourage creators when they think about their thumbnails, their titles, their packaging, to think about, don't forget about that viewer who doesn't know your channel and is seeing this thumbnail, your channel, for the first time. Are they going to understand the context that you're giving them? Sometimes creators can anchor a bit much on their core audience that knows them well. And so just think about that and where you are in your channel life cycle. And try different things, see what works.
I want to go back for 1 second to the idea of attention. Attention is competitive. People have a lot of options on where they're going to watch. They have a bunch of different services, a bunch of formats, and a bunch of different content. And what we hear sometimes, Todd, is that I didn't see the thumbnail. I never saw that video. And then we've sometimes gone in and checked and say, we offered it to you 19 times, and maybe you clicked on Chucky's thumbnail instead because he was better at grabbing attention. How does that mechanic sort of work?
We do try to be mindful about how much we recommend the same content to someone. And if we recommend the same video too much, people will complain, hey, my recommendations, I always see the same videos, I don't want to watch them. This is actually one of our top user complaints around the homepage is that their recommendations show the same videos too much. But if we show them, if we only showed each video one time, and if you didn't click, you missed it, and the only way you'd find is through search, we would miss out on a lot of things as well. And so we're constantly both looking at, what are users saying about their experience with, are they getting too much or not enough of the same video? And then we're also feeding it, billions of examples of people and what they're, what are they doing? Does it take them like 5 times before, a video that they do want to watch? Does it take them 5 impressions before they'll click it? Does it take them 25? And we've run all sorts of experiments around, you know, when we initially got complaints about too much repetition, we ran some experiments like, well, what if we just limited it to like eight times? And then we looked at what happened, and we found that when we try to have like a one size fits all solution where we say no video can be recommended more than 8 times, it doesn't perform very well. People don't watch YouTube as much, they don't come back as often. Um, and so we don't want to be adding those sorts of rules when they're not actually helpful. And instead, what we try to do is learn for each viewer.
And knowing it's competitive, Chucky, what is your process for coming up with a thumbnail that you think is going to win that click? I mean, hopefully immediately, but at least pretty quick.
Yeah, so I have like a feeling, which is like a weird way to explain it, of something. Is it clickable or is it not clickable? And I think you learn that over time as a creator. Like you want to make sure that it's gonna grab attention, and like it's important to say like I think for us we make unique videos, and so we try to basically say like there's no way that this person did this. And then when it comes to our thumbnail, we try to showcase it in the best way possible. So the best way with doing that is making the thumbnail easy to understand. And that way, when they look at it the first time, they're saying, wow, like I know what's going on in this video. I'm going to click on it. If they have to spend like 10 seconds or 20 seconds to try to understand what's going on in your thumbnail, they're probably not going to be that invested to spend that amount of time to figure out what's going on. And they're going to keep scrolling. So making it easy to understand is incredibly important. And then I would also just say, too, is visual clarity. Like, if you have a lot going on in your thumbnail, when you design your thumbnail in Photoshop, it's, very big, right? And it's the whole screen of your computer. But when it's actually on YouTube, it's much smaller. And so you have to think about it. What does it look like when it's much smaller? How is someone going to perceive this? And how is someone going to read this thumbnail? Because all the small details you pay attention to when it's like a large screen do not really help you as much when it's like a smaller image. So we always try to look at our thumbnails as if it was already posted on YouTube to kind of see what that looks like, to give us a better example. Like, is this something that catches my attention, or is this something that's like way too cluttered and, people aren't going to understand what's going on?
Can we talk a little bit about like that transition from the thumbnail to the video and how you think about that? And I've heard some interesting stories about how some creators really focus on the intro and the thumbnail as a connection. Do you look at it that way?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that. I think the way that we always, approach a video is we want to make sure what we say in the title and thumbnail is represented in the video. Most of the time these days, most people don't want to give you that much time. Like you can't waste a minute getting into what you represent in the title and thumbnail. So we try to, have expectations set in the first 30 seconds of the video. Like what we said in the title and thumbnail is what you're going to see in the video. And so for us, we try to also, optimize through autoplay on YouTube, which is allowing us to basically say, like, let's say someone's scrolling on home. If you stop at a thumbnail, YouTube now autoplays the video and will show you the intro of that video. And so there's no audio, like you can click to toggle the sound, but basically you're only showing visuals. So, it's going to play the whole video if you want it to there, but ultimately you want the first, 5-6 seconds to be visually appealing and probably represent what you had in the thumbnail. It doesn't always have to be that way. We don't always make sure the thumbnail aligns with the intro, but it is something that sets expectations. And so if someone was not sure if they were going to click based off your title and thumbnail, then they watch the autoplay and it kind of represents what the thumbnail and title said, they might actually click into this video and watch the entire piece of content now. So we definitely try to optimize some videos. We don't optimize every video for the thumbnail and the intro to be aligned, but we do try to always make sure every single video meets expectations of the title and thumbnail. And I think that plays a massive role into whether someone stays and watches long. It's not a successful video if someone clicks on your video, watches for 30 seconds, and then clicks off. But it is successful if someone clicks on the video, watches to the end, and feels like they were happy with what they watched. And the way that you need to kind of set expectations is just stating that in the beginning. Or at least telling people that you'll get into it later in the video. But if you say something that's not true, or if you don't talk about what the title and thumbnail is in the beginning, you're probably going to notice a little bit of a drop off. And now it depends on the content, and not everything is one-to-one like what we do here at MrBeast. So I don't want to set rules, but I would say that does help people want to stay around longer, knowing that what they clicked on is what to expect.
There is an inherent risk, right? Like you open up the YouTube homepage and those videos are saying, give me 7 minutes, give me 15 minutes, give me half an hour of your life. And so like, it's risky because maybe like you're not sure about it. And I think that when you do that, when the thumbnail and the title make a promise and then the intro is a payoff, like it reduces your anxiety. It's like, oh, I clicked on this and I'm going to get what I want. And I'm not going to spend another 5 minutes scrolling for another video. I think that's powerful. And I've heard you say this before too, Todd, that packaging isn't just the thumbnail and title, it includes what the video delivers on those.
Yeah, I see a lot of videos out there these days, both on YouTube and beyond, that kind of put a sort of like a trailer as part of the intro, where, it's not like a multi-minute thing, but if you can help preview what the user might get if they stick around in the video, I think we've seen that can help set expectations and help a user understand what the payoff's going to be if they stick around. I've heard that a lot of movie trailers these days are also, they found that even within a trailer, they have like the full trailer might be like a couple minutes long. They've started to have kind of a mini trailer in the first few seconds where you kind of get an overview of the trailer. And I think you can kind of think of this as kind of progressively disclosing, there's going to be, it's kind of similar to like how people read the news or stories out there. They might start with a headline. Well, that only gives us a little information. Might read the first paragraph that gives them the summary, and then they may want to stick around for the whole thing. I think if you can help them navigate that information, where it just feels kind of like continuous, and it can really help kind of on-ramp the person to the whole video.
Hayden Hillier-Smith pointed this out in one of his videos about one of your videos, Chucky, and saying that on traditional linear television, Survivor makes a promise they're going to vote somebody off, but you've got to wait an hour to get there. But in a MrBeast video, when Jimmy says he's going to throw somebody off, the minute that video starts, he throws somebody off. Like he rewards you, he shows you he's going to deliver on that promise, and then like he spends the next 30 seconds building up the next person that gets thrown off, and does it in various different ways to hold you. And I think that is a stark difference when people have the ability to abandon a video at any point.
Yeah, with TV, it's just different than YouTube these days. Like even the side of clicking, like if you think about how TV was, it was always just showing the channels. There was no thumbnails on the channels that you were going to click. If anything, it just said the network that it was on and what show was playing. Where now you have that clickability. And so it's just totally different than how TV was. And even with the content with TV, is you are more willing to stay and watch the show because there was only so many channels and so many shows on at that time. But with YouTube, you're not like, you can click off at any point and you can kind of scroll. And some people start to lose interest at, the 2-minute mark or 3-minute mark of the video because maybe it's not as entertaining. And so then they decide their attention starts going to the side. They look at the suggested videos and then they click off. And so, yeah, it is something where you want to have things constantly going on. You still want to pay off at the end of the video because that, helps people watch. It's a reason to stay around to the end. But also, at any point, there's a part where they could be boring and people could find themselves scrolling and suggested and click on another video.
How much do you prototype? Like there's this famous design philosophy where you have like 100 ideas, 10 prototypes or candidates, 1 winner. Do you go through a similar process where you have like a bunch of different iterations for something and you whittle those down to get to where you want it to be?
We start off with ideation. It's always really important to make sure you have a strong idea. With starting off with an idea, like that is why someone's actually going to click on your video and watch into the end. Like you can make a beautiful title, you can make a beautiful thumbnail, but if the idea is not strong, people might not click on the video, and that's kind of a problem. Or it might appeal to a smaller audience. And so it's really important to make sure when you create an idea that you think it's a strong idea. And if you want more views, you should probably make sure that you think it appeals to a larger audience. Like, would people want to watch this? And then you could optimize your title and thumbnail and make it more appealing and clickable. But if you don't have a good idea, like people might not watch into the end of the video. For example, we uploaded the video 100 days trapped together. The reason why someone would click on that video is because it's 100 days of them being trapped together. You have to watch into the end to see the finale of them getting out. And not saying everybody watched into the end, but that is like straight from the idea to the video concept. The ending is where they get out. And I think that's kind of important.
And when you're making a thumbnail for that, do you make like 10 versions first and try to see which one you think is more appealing? Do you try to make sure the thumbnail and the title are similar so they reinforce each other, or they contrast so that maybe someone who doesn't like the thumbnail will still get caught up by the title? How do you think about those sorts of things?
Yeah, so our ideation process is where we spend most of the time coming up with that title and thumbnail. So it's like idea, then you get the title and thumbnail, and we try so many different thumbnails. Like, how can we represent this content the best? How could we make it clickable? And so we probably come up with like 50 concepts per video, which is excessive. And I'm not saying everyone has to do that, but that's just the level that we're at. We're like trying to come up with unique ways to get people to click on the video. And then after that, we're putting it into concept art, which then says like, hey, like, so first we get someone to draw it up and it's like an illustrator. And then we do concept art, which we like Photoshop with like really rough assets to try to say, is this actually going to look good? Like, we don't want to waste Jimmy's time. So let's make sure that this thumbnail looks good. And then once we're like, yes, this is clickable. And right now we're trying to do like 3 thumbnails so we could use the A/B testing feature from YouTube. And so once we have 3 that we really like, that's when we actually then shoot source. Every single one of our videos, we don't go off of Google to find, images and try to make things work. We shoot our own source in studio, so that way we get the angles we want, and we don't have to make any sacrifices to the idea and the thumbnail idea that we had. And so then we can bring it to life, fully polish it up, and then make a final thumbnail. And then there's also like mini things that we do, like changing the shirt colors, putting Jimmy in a suit, putting him in a shirt with the MrBeast logo, the different color of a house, or we change so many different aspects. So we end up having
Mouth
like hundreds
open,
of
mouth
thumbnails.
closed, famously.
Yeah, the mouth closed and mouth open. Exactly.
What was that like for you, that experience?
Oh, it was so funny. I was the one fighting internally for a mouth open, and Jimmy kept talking to me and saying, like, I think we should close the mouth. And then as soon as A/B testing came out, he was like, let's run the test. And I was like, awesome, let's do it. And it was funny because the change was insane, because we did it for about like 30 videos, and all 30 of them with the closed mouth actually led to higher watch time on the video. And so it was a small difference, but 30 in a row gave us the signal of like, okay, if it was like half and half, then it maybe wasn't a big change. But the fact that 30 out of 30 thumbnail changes, it all showed success with A/B testing, it was something that really stood out to us. Like, okay, and I was able to admit I'm wrong, like, Jimmy, you won that one. And he was like, I knew it. And he was so excited to, tweet that out and share those findings.
You talked a lot about, a lot of production process that you go through to generate candidate thumbnails, refine them, shoot original content. What do you think about creators who say, I just want to focus on making great videos, and I feel like I don't like the fact that YouTube makes me like focus on thumbnails. Like, why should I have to do that? Am I really just like, why do I have to like clickbait people and focus on that? And wouldn't it be better if we just didn't have custom thumbnails, because it just creates too much work for creators? What would you say to that?
I would say that YouTube is built on the clickability. Like, I think I understand that point of view. One time Casey and I said the same thing to me of like, I don't want to like plan out a title and thumbnail ahead of time. I want to make the video and then worry about it after. And that's just the opposite of how we operate as a company. But I understand that point of view. I would say though, making something that's clickable is really appealing to people's interests. And so I think that it is really important, because it gives people optionality. Like, with content right now, if you didn't have thumbnails, if there's no custom thumbnails, you wouldn't be appealing to as many people. People might not have the interest. They might not know what's in the content, and they would have to watch. And so I think the reason why thumbnails are so important, it helps you reach a broader audience. I think that if we didn't have thumbnails, and I think it just served content, you would find that the core audience would watch, but growth wouldn't be as much as if you had titles and thumbnails. And again, I don't have data to support this, but this is something that I just truly believe that like the way that your idea, title, and thumbnail can appeal to a larger audience just shows. Like, for example, there's some channels out there that were doing content, in 2012 to 2017, right? And they just made totally different types of content. Then they pivot in 2017 and try a new content. And because it's appealing to a larger audience, they change their titles and thumbnails. They, make sure that their new content is different. They appeal to a new audience and can continue to grow. Whereas I think if you didn't have titles and thumbnails, you might see people not finding that audience. You still have that core audience. Again, personal belief, no data to back that up, but just a thought that I had.
Isn't that true in general, though? I mean, like magazines have covers, movies have posters, books have jackets, stores have branding. Like, there's the history of art and the history of commerce has both been that the packaging is really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, with so many choices out there, and sometimes, yeah, we hear from viewers that it's hard for them to decide what to watch. There's so many options, and so anything that we can do and creators can do to make it easier for them to know what's going to be, a great video for them, I think is actually makes it easier. To Chucky's point, that people will watch more when it's easier for them to know what they're getting into.
Todd, when people do A/B testing, we give them back watch time. And we've had some people say they would rather have click-through rate because they want to know how effective that thumbnail is at getting the click. What is the rationale for watch time?
We want to enable creators to deliver great value to audiences. And the way that they do that is by doing two things: getting the users to click and getting them to watch the video. There is a danger by focusing too much on solely clicks that creators could create thumbnails that attract audiences that are not actually interested in watching the whole video and abandon the video early. And that's not good for the creator. It's not good for the viewer. It's not good for YouTube. And so we want to focus creators on delivering the entire value. If your thumbnail is not driving clicks, then your watch time is going to go down. So it does factor in both elements. And I think giving creators that holistic view where they can align the thumbnail to the promise they deliver and focus on, having those both connect and be consistent with each other will ultimately lead to a much better experience for viewers, and which grows how many people are watching, etc.
Yeah, you have to click to watch and you have to retain to get time. So it gives you the best of both worlds. You've been using it for a while now, Chucky. A/B testing. We call it we call it officially thumbnail test and compare, and it lets you do 3 thumbnails. It's being tested on 50,000 accounts, which sounds like a lot, but in the grand scale of YouTube is a very small fraction of accounts. We're hoping to roll it out to everybody later this year. But what's your experience been with A/B testing so far, and what's your strategy sort of been?
I really like it. I think it's kind of killing my personal biases. So before A/B test, I would say this is my favorite. This is what we're going to launch with. If the video is doing great, awesome. We keep that title and thumbnail. If the video's performing really, really bad, then we would switch that thumbnail. And so we would always have to make the decision, well, like, should we switch it now or is it too early? Does it need time to find the audience? And so we had to make those decisions, where now we run an A/B test and we see the results of, this one was, people found this one more clickable, or they just had a better experience with it. Because again, it's not determining click-through rate. So yeah, it was interesting because there's some thumbnails we had that ended up, beating my personal bias and saying like, oh, it was this one. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And sometimes me and Jimmy will go back and be like, I'll be like, I want A, and he'll be like, I want B. And then now we run the ABC, and then either he wins or I win, and we're like, oh, like one of us was wrong. And so it's really cool to be able to determine which one is going to be successful. Sometimes we run multiple A/B tests on a video because we have come up with, 5 thumbnails, for example. So we get to test the winner compared to 2 other ones. And if it wins again, it starts to show us like, okay, that is the one we're going to keep on the video.
Yeah, we do we do see that the audience composition can vary quite a bit over a video's lifetime. To your point, within the first hour of an upload, you're going to be hitting user subscriptions feeds. You're going to be hitting notifications of people who have asked to get every upload. And that audience who's like waiting for the video to come out and wants to watch it right away is very different from the audience who still hasn't watched it 30 days in. And so I have heard stories from creators saying that, like, oh yeah, what worked the first week, actually we ran the test again, and a month in, there's a different thumbnail that's performing better. And some people might say, well, does that mean the tool's broken? Well, there's some things we just really can't control for, which is the fact that different people watch at different times. And that might be something to think about, like when you draw a conclusion about which thumbnail works, make sure you're also considering the context of when that test was run and what other variables might be at play beyond just the selection of thumbnails you're offering.
One thing I loved was early on, Jimmy was a big advocate for this tool because he said it would help teach creators about thumbnails. Like we were all going to learn through this process. YouTube would learn, creators would learn. And I think we're seeing that. Like some people might say, oh, orange is the best color for thumbnails. I've made a thumbnail A/B test and orange won. And then that goes to the community and now everybody's making orange thumbnails. So someone makes a blue thumbnail and then that one wins. And you start to learn, oh, there's trends. If everybody's doing one thing, this might win now, but when they shift, like maybe Jimmy's mouth was open for so long, people were desperate for a closed mouth. But maybe after a year of closed mouth, if he does a different facial expression, that'll stand out. And what really excites me is that some videos have like multiple plots or multiple story angles, and people might have been afraid to test those different angles. And now they can, and maybe discover a new audience pocket that can take a stalled video and get it some exposure. And maybe it'll run dry and you'll switch again, but it gives you the freedom to sort of see where the video can live.
One question that creators often ask, I might as well share here, is if they change a thumbnail or update the title, does that trigger the algorithm to kind of test the video more since things have changed?
Do you
And
re-index it is the question, right?
yeah, do we give it any sort of favorable treatment where we're going to give it more chances now because we noticed something was different? The answer is that we don't. And part of that is because if you could get kind of favorable treatment just by swapping some metadata, creators would just do that all the time so they could just get as much as they could. Um, but the other reason is we actually found that we don't need to, because if the thumbnail or title change actually has a difference, we've seen that pick up within like seconds of the change happening without us doing any special thing other than now showing that different metadata. You could see it sometimes in the real-time graphs. When you see those jumps coming from a change of a title or thumbnail, those are all coming from audience reactions, and there's no like algorithm boost that is given to things that are just updated.
Going back to the scale that you operate at, Chucky, when you can do all of these different thumbnails, all of these iterations, ideations, some creators might say, I don't have those resources. But what we're seeing now is a lot of Gen AI tools that maybe don't require you to have a staff of 20 Photoshop artists to make you, 30 different thumbnail variants to test every time. You could ask it to render like a whole bunch of different prototypes for you. And maybe you still get an artist to do the last version, or you still make the last version. But are you excited about any of the AI tools when it comes to thumbnails, just in terms of helping you explore options?
Yeah, we actually use AI to help us with ideation of thumbnails. For example, if we're trying to show off the $1 versus $1 billion house, we want to make sure that we choose an interesting looking house for that thumbnail. And so we would use generative AI to kind of say, like, give us 100 different houses. Like, how can we represent a house really luxurious, gold house? Where normally I would have to have someone 3D render and try to create that for me. Now I could have 100 in a few seconds. And that's been really interesting to kind of pick from and say, oh, this is interesting. I never would have thought about having the windows like this, or I never would have thought that this style of house would have been the one that is actually something that like stands out to me for whatever reason. So just having the ability to just say, print me 100, and then if I didn't like any of them, print me another 100. And I might take things from here and there and say, oh, that window's cool. Let's apply it to this one. And it allows us to just have more creativity. It feels like you're asking someone like, hey, get me 100 this, and then they're able to send it to you, and then you're able to look at it. So yes, generative AI is incredibly cool to use, and it's not something that we're using for the final thumbnail right now, but it's helping me with ideas, and that as a resource is incredibly powerful. And if I had that like 3 years ago, I think our thumbnails would have been even better then. So I definitely like using generative AI.
Have you experimented with using generative AI for titles at all, like to try to come up with different titles given a concept, or just
Yeah,
for thumbnails?
we've been trying. It's definitely something that isn't the easiest because I think with generative AI, it can kind of help us with ideas. Like if we describe the kind of content where we're like, oh, we want to do X versus Y, like give us, things. Like if we did kids versus adults, list other factors or formats that you could express. And maybe they say like YouTubers versus TikTokers. And so it can kind of fill in the blanks. But as of like, creating a unique title, we haven't had the most success, and we're still working on tweaking something that we've been trying to build internally and make it better. But like for example, when we did 7 days stranded at sea, that was just something that I thought sounded visually appealing. Like I knew saying 7 days stranded at sea was good, 7 days stranded on an island, it kind of had a ring to it, and that was something that AI couldn't do. So I believe that you can kind of use AI, but it's not perfect just yet. And so we're still working towards improving what we're currently using.
Todd asked about faces on thumbnails previously, which is a big question we get. We also get asked a lot about text on thumbnails. Like some people will have no text on thumbnails. They believe the image itself should tell a complete story. Other people will basically recapitulate the title or sneak a second title option in like 3 lines of text on a thumbnail. How do you feel about that?
This is what we call complementary packaging, where you basically use the title and the thumbnail to secure the click. There's a lot of criminal investigation videos on YouTube, and I think they have the best packaging, like complementary packaging, where they'll say the title. So, for example, the one I have pulled up here is When the Suspect is Smarter Than the Detective. And then it just has an arrow pointing at the individual in the seat being investigated, and the text says secret genius. Or there's another one that I really liked where it's like, when a criminal is smarter than the detective. And then the text that they use is, why was I arrested if I'm not under arrest? And so those are kind of things to create interest in a video of saying, oh, this is what the title was. And then you see the text. That's like a quote from what the person was being investigated. So text could be really useful in a thumbnail. For us as well on MrBeast, we've used text to say, like for example, the Last to Leave Circle video just hit 400 million views. We actually have Last to Leave Circle wins $500,000 in the title. And in the thumbnail, we show a lot of people. And for text, we show 100 people in the bottom corner because it's to represent all of the people in the video. And sometimes if you've ever seen our 7-day challenges or 50 hours, you'll see the day 2 text. And that also can provide a clickability aspect because it's like 50 hours. And then in the thumbnail, you show what's happening in the content and it says day 2. Shows that it's actually going on for 2 days. And so those combinations are what we use to secure the click in what we call complementary packaging.
I've talked to some live stream creators, and one of the challenges that they have is that it's sometimes hard to convey in a thumbnail that is static what's exciting about tuning into a live stream. And it got me thinking about, are there tools that you could imagine as a creator that YouTube could offer that could help creators better convey what's a reason to click or a reason to watch a video? Obviously custom thumbnails and titles are one tool. Any ideas for other tools, like within a live stream, you could imagine tools that make it easier for creators to kind of like dynamically update the thumbnail over time during the live stream. But even beyond thumbnails, some of the things that we're curious about is what is the other data points or tools that viewers might use to solve this core problem of like, should I watch this video or not?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's also a complicated question because there's no easy answer. I think live streams are different than videos. Videos, you kind of set an expectation, and there's a lot of, basically creating the video. And when you have a title and thumbnail, like for example, when we did our last live stream, we've always used titles and thumbnails because they were always events. But if you're a gaming YouTuber and you're streaming and you have like a live stream, you could create a challenge in the video, like I won't get off until I get 20 wins in the game. Like you can create expectations and interesting things to tune in. Like, oh, I wonder what like if I was a viewer, I'd be like, I wonder what win they're at right now. And so I click on their stream, and then they have like an overlay that says like 11 out of 20. That's like an interesting way to package a live stream. But as far as like if you're just doing a regular live stream, it might be more difficult. Like playing Valorant with my friends is not a super clickable title and probably thumbnail that they chose if it doesn't, if it's compared to all the other content that might have better titles and thumbnails and like expectations. And so I think that the best way a live streamer could create interest is creating a challenge that they're doing in the live stream. There's probably a bunch of other ways, but it's a difficult problem because live streaming and videos are very different, and they set up different expectations. So it's hard to compare to a video.
Especially if you change topics a few times through your live stream, like a 10-hour Ludwig live stream that might go through various phases of content types.
Definitely. I would have no clue what to do there. And I think that that's something that it's just different type of content when it's a live stream. So I'd probably have to think on that more.
See, I thought you were just going to say, give us title A/B testing and just drop the mic.
I do want title A/B testing.
What would you say to maybe a smaller channel creator who wants to, up their thumbnail and title game, but doesn't have resources and maybe just can't invest in, super high-end production tools? What would you tell them to do to maximize their chances of success with thumbnails and titles?
I would say that you want to kind of study what's doing well. It's really helpful to kind of see videos that have performed better on average than other videos. And so you want to be able to look at, okay, this is something that stands out. Why is it interesting to me? Break everything down to the first principles, and then look at the content that you're trying to post. If there's other people creating content similar to you and doing it successfully, what are they doing in their title and thumbnail that maybe secures the click? Also watch the content, because it's not always about the title and thumbnail. See what they're doing differently in their videos. Do you notice a pattern across all their videos? Why do you watch those videos? And so you really have to start questioning, because there's only, so much you can do on your own. But if you start looking at what other people are doing, you might find a little bit of inspiration. Oh, he worded this differently. Oh, like I do a 3-second pause before I get into the next segment of the video. He just, does his wording and then instantly moves into the next segment. And so you might be able to find, so many different ways to do that, content wise, but also like going back to the title and thumbnail, like they might handle something differently, and they might, make it, whether it's the visual clarity, whether they have something that's more clickable. Not having tools is, rough, but there's multiple free sites out there. There's a site like Photopea, which is just like a Photoshop clone, but it's free and it's online. And so if you can't afford Photoshop, that's an alternative that you can use. I believe Canva can also help people with thumbnails. And yes, they might not be as optimized as other creators, but that might be a good start, help you earn some revenue on YouTube, and then reinvest back into your channel and, learn those applications. When I was a small creator before I came on to Beast, I was learning everything from editing to photoshopping to seeing what was doing well on YouTube, learning how to commentate and pronounce things properly. If I'm sounding bored and dead like this, it's not a great intro. But if I'm like, hey guys, welcome back to my video, like having that enthusiasm can help. Now, I'm not saying that works for everything, but you kind of want to be able to see what does well and what doesn't do well. And that's also title and thumbnail and also the content.
In terms of seeing what does well, I highly recommend that creators spend some time in the audience tab on their analytics where they can find other videos their audience is watching this week. So they don't have to just look at like what Mr. Beast is doing because that may not be their audience. They can go in and see from people who watch their channel what else is, you know, delighting them on other channels. They can see that right within their analytics audience tab. So check that out, and I totally agree with your advice around, you know, put yourselves in the, you know, look through the eyes of the viewer, and what is it that the viewer, how are they going to react? What is working for them will help you figure out what to do.
The only thing I think that's fantastic. The only thing I would add, because I went through that a couple times starting new channels, is like just pick something. Like don't try to do everything at once. Don't try to have too many variables. Just pick something. Even I used to journal. I'd put a list of things I wanted to improve. I'd pick one and I would deliberately, like methodically test what was making it better each time until I got to like diminishing returns, and then I'd go on to the next thing. Because it's just a lot of work in when you're a new creator. So be kind to yourself and try to have a step-by-step approach.
Yeah, 1% improvement on every video continuously will make your videos better in the long term. So always think about the long term. You don't have to change everything tomorrow to get an amazing video. It's about improvements. If you go look back at some of our content 3 years ago, it's totally different than the content we're posting today. And that was because we gradually improved over time. So don't be too hard on yourself. Definitely take time to make improvements.
Todd, Chucky, thank you so much for joining us. This is, I think, going to be super valuable for creators, and I really appreciate both your time.
Great.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you all for watching. You should absolutely drop your advice, your challenges, any and all questions you may have in the comments below. And then it's my hand-picked next watch here versus the algorithm's top rec there. So click on one and let's see who picked best.